Hello, and welcome back to Avon Talks. In 1736, Benjamin Franklin founded the Union Fire Company in Philadelphia. This would be the first volunteer fire department of its kind in the United States and laid the foundation for a tradition that continues to be practiced throughout many American towns today. Avon is one such town. The Avon Volunteer Fire Department, with its 4 stations and almost 200 staff, is a completely volunteer-based organization that has been serving the town's needs for over half a century. Joining us for this episode to discuss the history and development of the Avon Volunteer Fire Department are Fire Chief Bruce Appell and Board Member James DiPace. Thank you both so much for being here. So the first area that I really want to cover, you guys both look at the show notes, is the history of the fire department. And I think like a lot of the established organizations in Avon, the Avon Volunteer Fire Department wouldn't become officially established until around the mid-20th century. But, Avon was obviously around for a while longer than that. So I was wondering if you guys could talk about what firefighting was like prior to the sort of centralization of everything within the fire department as it is right now.
Yeah. There was 5 different fire departments in the mid. They all started in the early 40s. There was the Secret Lake Fire Department. There was which Bruce and I didn't really know about until I did some research, was the Cherry Pond Fire Department. Yep. There was the West Avon Fire Department, and then there was the Avon Fire Department. The areas of, and you talk about what was done before, the areas of Huckleberry Hill. That was protected by, half of it was protected by Collinsville Fire Department, and half of it was covered by the Tungus Hose Fire Department. That area, because Avon didn't have anything in that area.
One of the things that a lot of people don't really recognize about Avon and its history is that in the 50s and 60s, Avon was much more segregated into different neighborhoods, and a lot of these neighborhoods would have their own sort of personality, and I was wondering if that was something that the fire department would also have.
Well, I mean, those fire departments were created because of the neighborhoods.
Right.
I mean, that's the history of the fire service in the nation. It was created by neighborhoods because of the need. And it wasn't like a city, but you had a neighborhood that needed fire protection of some type. And that's really how that was orchestrated. And people met the fire departments in the beginning. They met in somebody's garage. Or in somebody's home. That's where they'd have their meetings, and they take minutes. And I've got a pile of all sorts of stuff that talks about how they organized.
Right.
And it's pretty substantial if you really get a chance to look at it. So, again, like the Cherry Pond was created because of the area of Secret Lake. They also had a racetrack over there. I don't know if you're aware of the racetrack that was on the Craigmore Circle, Brentwood area, and they had to provide fire protection there.
It was like a automobile racetrack?
Yeah, it was an automobile racetrack.
I know in an earlier conversation we sort of talked about how part of the firefighting being created as an asset of these neighborhoods is that they were primarily made up of volunteers from that neighborhood, and I feel like that relation of being sort of protecting your own neighborhood creates a different sort of dynamic between the firefighter and the people in the people that they're trying to serve. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the kinds of volunteers that would normally populate this kind of group, and what was it that sort of motivated people? What was that relationship like?
The early day, I mean, a lot of the fire services Jamie alluded to started very early on, long probably before a lot of service organizations. And it was a sense, who was going to do it. Back then, everybody helped one another. Everyone helped their neighbor.
Right.
And over history, when there was a fire, you'd see you've seen movies and pictures of bucket brigades and things like that. There weren't modern day fire trucks, and there wasn't, they had to, either salvage what they could or they used buckets and barrels and ran and threw water at, to try to put the fire out.
Yeah.
And it was very labor intensive,
right,
to put fires out. And so the sense of the community, I think, one, to help one another, and to protect their own property. Everyone had to work together to, you're helping someone else, but protect one another. And that's kind of, throughout the country, the fire services kind of developed. And you did develop that sense of community because it was the hub of activity. There might not have been, maybe there was a government, but the fire services were the meeting hall. That's where everything took place at the fire departments. As they slowly developed, even early on, that was kind of that hub of activity. People met at the fire department.
It was the social aspect.
It was the social aspect of it.
Besides fighting a fire, possibly, because there weren't any. There were very few, far between, fortunately.
Oh, really? I feel like back then there would have been more fires just because of the nature of being, less codes, less knowledge of how to prevent stuff like that.
No, I don't think there were that here in this area.
Okay.
Sure, there could have been a fire occasionally in somebody's home, or a brush fire, that type of thing, because everybody burned outside.
Right.
And something could have gotten away from them. But as Bruce was heading towards the social aspect, and that brought the families together.
Yeah, I mean, could you sort of expand a little bit more on what that social aspect would look like?
I mean, from what I read, from my research, it shows that everybody got together. Whether it was on the weekends, and they got together and they created fundraisers so they could buy a fire truck. And they had to do all that stuff on their own. Yeah. Because there wasn't a lot of money for the state or the communities to be able to do that type of thing.
Yeah.
When I first began, and that was 51 years ago, I don't know if we're talking modern day now compared to what the 40s.
Right.
I was going to joke and say we didn't have to push the horses in, but when I joined, it was a very much a social atmosphere. We did and again, it was different groups. The older folks hung together, the younger folks hung together, and that type of thing. So, and that's been human nature.
Yeah, I think this sort of gets to something else that I was sort of wondering at, which is, obviously everyone knows the fire department today, not just because they put out fires, but because they do all these other community events. But it sounds sort of like you guys also had these separate roles back in the earlier days when you guys weren't as formally organized. You guys still had these really large community roles. So I was sort of wondering, what else did the fire department do aside from fighting fires back before it was officially created?
I think a lot of them were involved in politics. Some of them were involved in politics, and whether it be on boards and commissions and things like that. I think through the years in Avon, we've had members that were in the fire service and still are in the fire service that are on different boards and commissions and so forth through the town, in kind of town government. I think that kind of is just a natural trend. I think it's a little less now, but again, they were centered around, it goes back around the sense of community, the community organization, the community ran together. They met at the firehouse so that everyone knew each other. So it was much easier to get involved in planning and running the town.
Right.
You had little meetings and things like that. It's not the modern day municipalities that we're running today.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the fire stations were around the community because they didn't have communications the way we have communications today. So how did people know, how did people know there was a fire?
Right.
And the big bells on the fire stations,
Right.
or even the modern day horns and stuff that went off.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the day, before all those horns and sirens, how did they have to spread the word out? Hey, there's a fire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was someone going up and down the street, whether it be on a horse at the time
Mm-hmm.
or something, and pooling resources into, and people lived in small towns and small areas.
Mm-hmm.
The countryside, and even our area back in the day was this was a lot of farmland out this
Right.
way. And
Right.
there was not a lot of industry here. So there was a lot of houses that were a long way away from getting help.
Mm-hmm.
So you had the small pockets. At Secret Lake is a bunch of houses, cottages that were built, summer cottages that were
Mm-hmm.
built on the lake. And much of Avon wasn't developed. I mean, Old Farm School, the property of Old Farm School had a lot of land all the way from Old Farm's property all the way down to, I think, close to 44. They owned a lot
Mm-hmm.
of land. So it was very hard for. So that's how that's one of how some of the fire departments became developed in certain locations, because
Mm-hmm.
they were around where people lived,
Mm-hmm.
and it got them involved in the community.
Yeah, I think a lot of that leaned into there were many people who came back from the war,
Mm-hmm.
and they were very involved with the military, and between World War II, the Korean War, and others. And this was just a natural step for a lot of those people to work their way into a paramilitary organization, if you want to call it. It was a natural fit for a lot of those folks.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that the role was different.
We're kind of getting to the point where by 1943, the Volunteer Fire Department would be officially established as the Avon Volunteer Fire Department that we know today.
Well, there was an Avon Volunteer Fire
Uh-huh.
Department. That was in 1943. There was the West Avon Volunteer
I
Fire
see.
Department. There was the Cherry Pond Fire Department. The Secret Lake Fire Department, Volunteer Fire Department, was created as a part of Cherry Pond. It was Cherry Pond. It became Secret Lake from everything that I've read. And so those were all between, I'd say, 1943 and 1946. And then in and around 1960 is when they began the merger talks
Mm-hmm.
to create one department. Even though there was still the Avon Volunteer Fire Department,
Mm-hmm.
it was simple for them to maintain that name.
I see.
It could have been anything.
Yeah.
It could have been. They could have named the fire department anything,
Mhm.
like Farmington or Unionville. It's not the Unionville or the Farmington Fire Department. It's the Tungus Hose Fire Department.
Mhm.
It's a name of an organization,
All right.
and the folks who were organized it chose the Avon Volunteer Fire Department.
Mm-hmm. But sort of on that point, I was thinking, so if so much of the early firefighting was sort of centered around communities and neighborhoods specifically, I was wondering, well, first of all, what was the reason why they decided to merge it? And also, secondly, how did that sort of change the nature of firefighting in Avon? I feel like, at least from my standpoint, shifting from a system that was, very much focused on individual neighborhoods to sort of covering the entire town, how does that sort of change that dynamic?
As the town grew, as that Cherry Hill Fire Department and the racetrack was torn down to put developments in, they developed Secret Lake, but the fire services back then, the leadership of the fire department was very progressive. Avon merged all these individual fire companies into one department with the town of Avon to make the Avon Volunteer Fire Department. A lot of towns still have individual fire companies, and they still operate as individual fire companies, and a lot of towns have multiple different fire companies in their jurisdictions.
Even today?
Even today. Farmington and Point has 3 different fire departments in the town of Farmington. They're funded similar, but they're all independently operated fire departments. Tungus Hose Fire Department is completely separate of the Farmington Fire Department, and East Farms Fire Department, I believe, is completely separate.
Right.
And so in the state of Connecticut, there's 360 something.
Yeah, there's just over 300 fire departments in 169 towns.
Mm-hmm.
So you do the math.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so we were very fortunate with the leaders back then. Again, it's getting enough people to do the job, and so we merged Avon. All the organizations merged very early on to one fire department to unite. I don't know if there was any in any of the history if there was any big contentions, discussions over it back then. I don't know if you saw any of that.
There was. I didn't see anything in my research in writing of any battles, or I'm sure there had to be disagreements on how they were going to do things. I mean, I've heard in years past of some interesting meetings, to say the least. But I mean, they all had a common goal,
Right.
and that was to create something better, and that's what they did.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned resources, but I'm also assuming that by 1970s, you know, things like these communication channels also became a lot faster, like you mentioned earlier. So it just became more feasible to even have this entire consolidated one where you actually could organize all of these from like one central place.
There was a time that when I first joined that everyone in the Farmington Valley and even beyond was all on the same frequency.
Oh, really?
So there could be a fire in Windsor Locks, and we're listening to them here in Avon.
Yeah.
And it used to be craziness when we'd have a thunderstorm because everybody's trying to talk on the same frequency.
Yeah.
So those were the resources that everyone used at that time, because it brought, as much as it confused things at times when incidents were happening, it also made everybody available.
I even remember that in the 80s when they would do tone tests, they would actually, the dispatcher would announce on the air any, is the air clear, any incidents going on before they would do a tone test or things like that. Yeah. So, I mean, that lasted well up into the,
Yeah, there's still some people on that frequency.
Yeah.
But I think also the other part is being such a strong community organization with the social dynamic change as the fire department in Avon became sort of more incorporated and officially organized.
I think as time has gone on, it's become a little less. As families evolved, as society has evolved, the kids they're getting a little bit more in the modern age. But as time has evolved and again, everyone's life becomes busy, you lose that sense of the fire service is less of that community hub anymore, because there's instant gratification with everything that's all the modern day, in the 90s, in the 2000s, all the modern day stuff that's happened over the years so it's been a challenge for the fire service recruiting people because it's harder to create that social piece. Now it does still happen. Unionville has a great following, for their carnival. They get a lot of turnout, community support in the town of Unionville. Avon has never had that. We've had our carnival for years. Our main fundraiser was our carnival and raffle, and it was down here on the Inford Street grounds, right here behind the post office, and we had crowds there, and I remember the crowds were packed, the fields were packed, but in reality, though, it was a very small grounds. We had good turnouts for the parade, but they slowly trickled off.
Right.
And that was kind of our big fundraiser. So it's hard to get people today to sense a community and organization, but there's also so many other competing interests. The Lions Club, Rotary, all sorts of clubs and organizations are all vying for people today. And so the fire service is losing some of that.
Right. Yeah, the fire service has a tough time today because of our requirements, because of the training requirements. I mean, from the time that I joined, and Bruce shortly thereafter. Yeah, we trained. And we trained for what we had to deal with. But, as the fire service expanded its grasp nationwide with fire certifications, that changed everything. I mean, you're talking, a minimum of 120 hours to become a entry-level firefighter today. So that's just to become a firefighter. So you join, and before you can go to fires, you got to do this training.
Yeah.
And then we still want you to do this. That's tough on people. People in today's day, they go, I don't have that time. My family dynamics aren't going to allow me to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. How have you guys been trying to deal with these changing standards and regulations, and, dealing with new technology coming that I'm assuming also probably involves even more training when some new piece of technology comes up?
People join for all different reasons. And we have people from all different walks of life who join. Somebody can be a CEO of a corporation,
right?
And somebody can be a landscaper,
right?
Or and a plumbers and electricians and office workers and all that stuff. So we don't require anybody to have any experience,
right,
to do this. You come to us, we provide it for you.
I think the biggest thing is the sense of, I think even today there's still people that have a sense of giving back to the community. And I think one of the questions probably coming up is why do people join the fire department? Is a sense to give back to the community and help out in a way that is meaningful. I mean, you do get a sense of, there's not a lot of, we do a lot of false alarms and things like that. But, at the end of the day, when there is something serious, we're all trained to deal with those situations. But at the end of the day, you feel good about being able to help out. You be able to feel, we help people at their worst time, at their worst moments, the fire department is there to help them. And I think that's what really motivates our members to continue to do that training, continuing to come out on Monday nights to drill, seek additional training. And, I think that's the underwriting, over the course of history to even to today's modern day fire services is kind of that is the one common thread amongst us. Yes, we're pulling a lot of strings to get that person to join because of everything that they have in their life that they're doing. Everyone's working in the family now. 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs to make ends meet. Their kids are working. They have so many different requirements for school and after school events, and then all the different things that are out there for people to do. And then Avon's population has grown because of our community and demographics to Hartford. So we've changed, I think, from a blue collar town. I think probably back early on, that changes the kind of whole dynamics of the fire service.
You mentioned something about what makes people do this sort of stuff,
right?
And the fact, one example that happened to us. This was a bunch of years ago, but not all that long ago, where we got called to a bus on fire at a church. Well, there happened to be a wedding going on, and the bus was meant to take the bridal party from the church to their reception. So we put them in the fire truck and brought them to their reception. So that was a huge hit.
Right. Okay.
The firefighters got a real kick out of it. They loved it. And so did the bride and the groom and the family and all that. That was a neighborhood thing. That was a community thing that happened because there were so many people involved in that. and that pumps up that makes everybody want to do that sort of stuff. We've had some, on the other side of that, we've had some very serious situations where you're standing in front of somebody's home as it burns up.
Modern, in today's society, people are moving from place to place. People move into the community. They take for granted, where they came from was a career department, or just they had services, and they move out. And I don't want to say people are complacent, but I don't think they really do a lot of homework. Avon comes up on a map, and it's a great place. It's great school systems. There's a lot of great stuff. Yeah. But they take for granted that we're a 100% volunteer fire department, and they don't even know. And so until we get to their door and we're actually servicing them and say, do you know we're 100% volunteer? And they kind of like, you are? They wouldn't even, that's not even comprehensible to some people today. So that's the challenge of people moving into your community if they're not engaged in the community. They live here, yes, but they're not engaged in all the day-to-day activities that are happening.
I mean, I think this kind of gets into the next part that I want to talk about, which is the fire department as it is today. As we, get into the 21st century, Avon's growing a lot. And as you mentioned, there's so many different things that are pulling people in all different directions and stuff like that. And not just the fire department, but all sort of volunteer or community-based organizations are sort of struggling to, pull membership and have people work with them, given how busy everyone's schedule is, given how every single kid has like 20 different extracurriculars every week. So I was wondering, more broadly, I guess, what are some of the ways that the fire department is being challenged and pushed to change in the 2000s and moving forward?
We understand the resource management end of it. We try to break it down so we get more volunteers. So it's not just firefighting we do. We have our fire police company, which they help with traffic management, scene security, protect the firefighters. We have a whole headquarters company of members, volunteers that come in and do a lot of our data entry and do help us with our inventory and photography, pictures, or history of the department, and numerous other items that need to get done. It's we're a big organization.
Right.
We have a lot of people, and it takes a lot of members to manage all of that. Then we have our actual firefighting component of it, and even that is separated into people that can actually go into a burning building, and those that can support from the outside, maybe just drive the trucks and pump water to the people that can go in, because we know we have limited amount of people that actually can go into a burning building and do the job today. So that's the number one challenge is getting enough people, trying to fill any ranks that we can get. And then how do we change the delivery? How do we reinvent time management? Because everyone's time is extremely precious today, and the training hours continue to go up, and there's potentially new OSHA mandates that'll be coming out that even drive us even more into time commitments and other things that we have to do. So I think that we're looking at adapting in how we bring members in, trying to streamline the process, and we're looking at maybe different training models. We currently train every Monday night, and then there's sometimes training on the weekends or special training. There's always other training that you can go to attend. How can we streamline that? So maybe we're not training every Monday night, or we train once a month to free up someone's personal time. We're looking at duty shifts, volunteering in the fire station. So instead of you're coming every Monday night or being on call, constantly being on call, and always living next to the pager, and whereas we have people actually maybe sleeping at the fire station,
right?
And so those people can do some of the more bulk of the calls, or the simple motor vehicle accident, or the CO call. A group of 3 people can do it, but we're not burdening the entire fire company, and burning our members out. And that's their only commitment, would be a 12-hour shift or a 24-hour shift a month, or however we set it up. So there's a lot of people that can devote a finite amount of time.
Right.
If you give them that finite amount of time, they'll join the organization. But the current model is you come and join. You have to make a percentage of calls or meetings or drills, and it's always Monday. It's Monday nights. It's of course we need members to come in all the other times. Whether emergencies unfortunately don't happen Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. They happen at 6 o'clock when it's dinner time. They happen at midnight. Saturdays and Sundays.
They happen on Christmas Day.
Christmas Day and Thanksgiving. And we help again, and that's we don't. A tragedy happen. Anything can be a tragedy to somebody, and whether it be someone's just cooking a turkey on Thanksgiving Day and they burn it in their oven, and they need help and assistance, and we're there to do it, and our people need to show up, and we show up and handle those situations. And so, getting back to how we change the model of the fire service is knowing the demographics of Avon, not being a blue-collar town. We don't have a lot of young kids in this community because they can't move into town to live here. So, we start one area I didn't mention was our Explorer program. We start our members can join the fire department at age 14 to 18 in our Explorer till they turn 18 in our Explorer program. Actually, they can be until 21 in the Explorer program, but basically 14 to 8 till they turn 18. They start in high school, and they usually continue in the fire service, a lot of them, or they have skill sets that they'll use for the rest of their life, whether they're in a volunteer fire department or not. A lot of them go on to continue to volunteer. That brings a lot of members in to the organization. But then when we get back to talent management, how does that filter in? Some of the things we're looking at, can we provide housing for some of our younger members? Subsidy, and you have to do more membership, provide more community hours. You're getting subsidized rent, but you have to do more community hours to the fire service and back into the community for that. All these different things try to continue being a volunteer fire department.
Right.
The longer we can continue volunteer fire department, we save a lot of money to the community.
I mean, I think it sort of gets to the point, which is part of the fire department is they need to get people to volunteer, but I think another part is they need to get these volunteers to stay with the department. And I feel like doing stuff like that, actually being able to see that you're helping people in the community is definitely one of those things that keeps people coming back. But I was wondering what other processes have you guys sort of gone through yourselves, both having been with the fire department for a number of years? What is it that really keeps you guys from sticking with it?
Well, speaking for myself, and I can speak a little bit for him, because we followed somewhat of the same paths. We did it for a profession, and we volunteer. We did it because that's what we wanted to do, right? We loved it. It was a great, for me, my career was fantastic. I miss it. I don't miss working, but I miss the job.
Right.
Now he's young enough that he can still do that sort of stuff. The new folks that are going into the office in Hartford and working all day, then coming home and going, I got to go to the firehouse, or the alarm goes off and goes, wow, okay, I get to go to this call.
Yeah.
But again, fortunately, we don't have a lot of serious incidents.
The interesting thing about the fire service is, yes, we do train. We train a lot. The thing about the job, whether it be career or volunteer, is that you go to work and you never know what is going to happen that day.
Right.
Yeah. It's not a Monday through Friday job. It's not a desk job where you're going to be doing the same thing. And you can completely do something different, at a moment's notice, whether it be a car accident, whether it be, rope. You could be on a boat doing a rescue. You could be fighting a fire one day. It just, every day is different. So there's always a different skill set to learn. You can never learn enough or know enough in this job. That's what makes it fun and exciting. I tell people that, we're no different. I'm no different than you. And most people aren't any different than me. It's the education behind us that makes you feel comfortable to be able to do what you can do. Someone that's that does computer programming, to me, like, blows my mind. I would never do that. I can't fathom doing that. But I suppose if I sat down with someone that did computer programming and we sat down and I learned about the code and how to write it, I'd be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Same thing for a firefighter. To be one of us, do our job. Come and join the fire department. Come down to see what we do. Watch what we do. Learn some of the training behind it, and then you feel comfortable in doing what we do. And we've had people that have joined fire police because they could never be firefighters, but they want to help the community. So they join the fire police, and then they start seeing, hey, well, they're really no different than I am. I can do that. I'll go to training, and they're gone from fire police to become a regular firefighters. And they get the training, and so that's a big key. But I think, again, the initial question was what kept us. There's a lot of intangible things, whether it be we have a small LoSAP program or tax abatement off your property taxes, and you can use the firehouse, and when you need it for a birthday party or something like that. There's a lot of intangibles, and at the end of the day, they all add up to peanuts. But the underlying reason why we do it is because we enjoy helping the community. I think everybody in the fire service, at the end of the day, will say, I enjoy helping people. From an early on, when I was a kid in Avon, I was born and raised here in Avon, I enjoyed helping people, whether it be, mowing the neighbor's lawn or doing something else, helping out, shoveling someone's driveway during the winter. And I looked at that time, they had an Explorer program at the police department, and they had an Explorer program at the fire department. And someone probably bugged me enough at that time to join the fire department instead of the police department. And so I joined as an Explorer. I think you were an Explorer? No. So, I joined at 16, 17, I think I joined as an Explorer for a brief period of time. And I've never looked back, and I've enjoyed the career. And I like that. I like that challenge every day. There's a lot of repetitiveness, but I like that challenge every day.
Not a lot of. I mean, like Bruce was saying, every day's different.
Right. Yeah.
You could get, on his way to work. Oh, I gotta go to a fire call. Or I gotta go to an accident, or I gotta go do this, or there's just so many different things in the job that make it very enjoyable. I mean, the nasty stuff isn't fun, but it's part of the job, and you have to do it. You deal with it.
And who doesn't like to drive a big red fire truck?
That's right. That's what I do now. I drive a big red fire truck.
This podcast is an Avon Historical Society production, edited by me, Ethan Guo. Special thanks to Priscilla Marshall for the graphics. If you would like to support this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever else podcasts are downloaded. Want to be featured on a future episode or stay up to date with the podcast newsletter? Feel free to reach out to us at avontalksahs@gmail.com. For more on the Avon Historical Society, visit www.avonhistoricalsociety.org.